The morning air was still cold when Staff Sergeant Michael Torres felt the first tiny hand wrap around his leg, then another, and another. 3 pairs of small arms encircled him like anchors, as if their collective grip could somehow defy the inevitability of what was about to happen. "Daddy, don't go." The words came out as a whisper from 6-year-old Emma, her face buried deep into the rough fabric of his combat uniform. Her twin brother Jake said nothing. He just held on tighter, his small body trembling against his father's knee. Michael tried to kneel down, to meet their eyes one last time, but their grip was relentless. 4-year-old Sophie, the youngest, had wrapped herself around his other leg with the desperate strength that only comes from pure, unfiltered love mixed with terror. The yellow school buster, same one that would take them to their grandmother's house while he was gone, sat idling at the end of their driveway. Its engine hummed with mechanical indifference, completely unaware that it was about to become the vessel that would carry away the 3 most precious pieces of his heart. He could feel his wife Sarah watching from the porch, her own tears falling silently as she witnessed this moment that no military family ever gets used to. No matter how many times it happens, the children's grip tightened even more. They sensed what was coming. But what happened next would break every heart watching and reveal the devastating truth about what it really means to serve your country when your entire world is clinging to your legs, refusing to let you go. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres had been dreading this morning for weeks. Not the deployment itself. He was a soldier, and soldiers deploy. But this goodbye, this was different. This was his 3rd deployment in 5 years, but his first since Sophie had learned to say "Daddy" with such heartbreaking clarity. The Torres family lived in a modest 2-story house just outside Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The American flag hanging from their front porch had weathered 3 previous deployments, its colors slightly faded, but still proudly displayed. Inside, the walls were covered with photos Michael in dress blues at their wedding, the kids' first steps, birthday parties he'd missed, Christmas mornings captured on video calls from halfway around the world. Sarah had been preparing the children for weeks, using a calendar marked with red X's to count down the days until Daddy's work trip. But no amount of preparation could soften the reality of this moment. Emma, the oldest at 6, understood enough to be scared. She'd started having nightmares about buses and airplanes taking people away forever. Jake, her twin, had become unusually quiet, following his father around the house like a shadow, as if proximity could somehow prevent the inevitable. Lila Sophie didn't fully grasp what was happening, but children have an instinct for loss. She'd been clinging to Michael for days, refusing to sleep in her own bed, insisting on sitting on his lap during every meal. The deployment orders had arrived 8 weeks ago. 15 months in Afghanistan. 15 months of missed bedtime stories, lost teeth celebrated over pixelated video calls, and birthdays marked by packages that would arrive weeks late. 15 months of Sarah tucking 3 children into bed alone, answering questions about when Daddy was coming home with forced smiles and carefully rehearsed optimism. Michael's duffel bag sat by the front door, packed with essentials, and a few precious items, photos of his family, tucked into every pocket. A small teddy bear that still smelled like Sophie shampoo, and letters from Sarah that he'd reread during the longest nights ahead. The morning routine had been deliberately normal. Pancakes for breakfast, cartoons on television, Sarah helping everyone get dressed while Michael double-checked his gear. But now, as the school bus waited and the moment of separation loomed, normal had shattered into a million pieces. The children hadn't planned this desperate clinging. It was pure instinct, the primal need to hold on to safety, to prevent their world from changing. And as Michael looked down at their tear-streaked faces pressed against his uniform, he realized that no amount of military training prepares you for the moment when your own children become your greatest battlefield. The weeks leading up to this moment had been a master class in silent suffering. Sarah had perfected the art of crying in grocery store aisles and shower stalls anywhere the children couldn't see her fall apart. She'd become an expert at maintaining normalcy while her world prepared to split in half. The Torres household had developed its own rhythm of anticipation. Every morning began with the unspoken countdown. Emma had started marking X's on her Disney princess calendar, her small hand drawing increasingly shaky lines as the numbers dwindled. She'd ask the same question every day. How many more sleeps with Daddy? And every day, Sarah's answer grew quieter. Michael had tried to create lasting memories in those final weeks. Saturday mornings became sacred. No military obligations, no preparations, just him and his children building blanket forts that seemed to grow more elaborate with each passing weekend. He'd read extra bedtime stories, his voice growing thick with emotion as he tried to memorize the weight of Sophie curled against his chest. The way Jake's breathing grew steady as sleep took hold, how Emma always insisted on one more chapter. The house itself seemed to hold its breath. Military spouses develop a sixth sense about deployments, the way conversations stop when children enter the room, how Daddy's phone calls become more frequent and more serious, the gradual accumulation of gear that appears and disappears like storm clouds gathering. Sarah had started taking photos of everything: Michael helping with homework, teaching Jake to ride his bike, braiding Emma's hair before school. She captured moments they'd previously taken for granted: his coffee cup beside hers on the kitchen counter, his boots by the door, the indent his head left on his pillow. These images would become lifelines during the months ahead. The children had begun exhibiting the telltale signs of pre-deployment anxiety. Sophie had regressed, asking for bottles and refusing to sleep without her father's old army tea. Jake had become hyper-vigilant, following Michael's every movement, memorizing his father's routines with the intensity of a miniature security detail. Emma had started hoarding small treasures hidden under her bed, as if collecting pieces of her father could somehow keep him close. 3 nights before deployment, Michael had sat each child down individually for special daddy time. With Emma, he'd painted her nails a sparkly pink and promised to video call for every important moment. With Jake, they'd worked on a puzzle together, his son's small hands occasionally reaching out to touch his father's face, as if trying to memorize every feature. With Sophie, he'd simply held her, singing the lullabies that would soon echo from a phone screen thousands of miles away. The most heartbreaking part wasn't the big gestures, it was the small ones. How Michael had started waking up earlier, just to watch his children sleep. How he'd linger in doorways, memorizing the sound of their laughter. How he'd catch Sarah, watching him with eyes that held 15 months' worth of unshed tears. Sarah had prepared care packages for the children, letters from Daddy to open on specific days, recordings of bedtime stories, small gifts wrapped and dated for future celebrations. She'd color-coded a calendar system, created video playlists, and rehearsed conversations she'd have to navigate alone. But no amount of preparation could fill the mickle-shaped hole that was about to open in their daily lives. The night before deployment, they'd all slept in the living room, a pile of blankets and pillows surrounding Michael like a fortress. Nobody spoke about it being the last time. Nobody mentioned the countdown that had finally reached 0. They just held each other a little tighter and pretended that morning would never come. But morning always comes. And now, as those tiny hands gripped his legs with desperate strength, Michael realized that all their preparation had been just an elaborate rehearsal for this moment of pure, unscripted heartbreak. Michael Torres had been a soldier for 12 years, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. He'd faced enemy fire, navigated IEDs, and led men through some of the most dangerous territories on Earth. But standing in his own driveway, feeling his children's desperate grip around his legs, he felt more vulnerable than he'd ever felt in any combat zone. The weight of his uniform felt different this morning. Every patch, every ribbon, every insignia that once represented pride and accomplishment now felt like symbols of separation. The American flag on his shoulder, the same flag his children pledged allegiance to at school, suddenly seemed like a cruel reminder of the choice between country and family that military personnel face with every deployment. Inside his chest pocket, folded carefully against his heart, were 3 letters, one from each child, dictated to Sarah and written in her careful handwriting. Emma's letter was the longest, full of promises to be good and questions about whether soldiers get mail in the desert. Jake's was simple. "Dear Daddy, I will take care of Mommy. Love, Jake." Sophie's was just a drawing stick figures, holding hands under a rainbow, with "I love Daddy" spelled out in Sarah's handwriting above crayon clouds. Michael's throat tightened as he remembered writing his own letters the night before, sealed envelopes, marked, "If something happens to me," hidden in a lockbox that Sarah knew about but they'd never discussed. In those letters, he'd tried to capture 15 months' worth of love, guidance, and fatherly wisdom. How do you condense a lifetime of "I love you" into words on paper? How do you parent from beyond the grave? The irony wasn't lost on him. He was leaving to fight for freedom, for the American way of life, for the very values he wanted his children to inherit. But in doing so, he was missing the daily moments that actually create those values: bedtime prayers, homework struggles, scraped knees that needed Daddy's special Band-Aids, dance recitals, and soccer games that shape a child's sense of worth. His mind flashed to his own father, also a career soldier, also frequently absent. Michael remembered similar goodbyes, similar bus rides, similar promises that Daddy'll be home soon. He'd sworn he'd be different, more present, yet here he was, perpetuating the same cycle of service and sacrifice that had defined his own childhood. The children's grip tightened around his legs, and Michael felt something break inside his chest. This wasn't like the movies. There was no stirring music, no flag waving majestically in slow motion. There was just the raw, ugly reality of small children who didn't understand why Daddy had to choose his job over them, why the flag mattered more than fairy tales and bedtime snacks. He thought about his fellow soldiers already deployed, the ones who'd been through this same goodbye, in barracks conversations and late-night phone calls. They'd all admitted the same terrible truth that leaving your children gets harder, not easier, with each deployment. That the pride of wearing the uniform becomes complicated when you see it, reflected in your child's tear-filled eyes, as a costume that takes Daddy away. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he tried to gently loosen their grip. He knew that in 30 minutes, he'd be on a bus to the airport. In 12 hours, he'd be halfway around the world. In 15 months, if everything went according to Planet B, home again. But children don't understand deployment timeline. To them, Daddy was leaving, and there was no guarantee he'd ever come back. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders like his full combat gear. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a father trying to be a hero for his country while remaining a hero to the 3 small people wrapped around his legs. And in this moment, those 2 roles felt impossibly contradictory. As the bus engine continued its patient rumble, Michael closed his eyes and tried to memorize everything: the weight of their small bodies against his legs, the sound of their muffled sobs, the way Sophie's curls felt against his hand. These sensory memories would have to sustain him through the longest nights ahead, when missing home felt like a physical wound that no amount of duty could heal. The yellow school bus had been idling for 7 minutes now, its diesel engine creating a mechanical heartbeat that seemed to count down the seconds until separation. The driver, Mrs. Henderson, was a veteran of military goodbyes. She'd seen this scene played out countless times in her 20 years of driving routes near Fort Campbell. She knew better than to honk or rush. Some moments demanded their own timeline. From her position on the front porch, Sarah watched the scene unfold with the helpless awareness of someone witnessing a car accident in slow motion. She could see the tension in Michael's shoulders, the way his hands hovered over their children's backs, wanting to comfort, but knowing that any movement might trigger an even stronger grip, her own hands clutched a tissue that had long since become useless against the steady stream of tears. The neighbors had started to notice. Mrs. June from next door had paused her morning jog, pretending to stretch against her mailbox while stealing glances at the Torres family drama. The Johnsons across the street had their curtains slightly parted. Military neighborhoods develop an unspoken understanding about deployment days everyone knows. Nobody interferes, but the collective weight of shared experience hangs heavy in the morning air. Emma's sobs had evolved into a rhythmic hiccuping that seemed to sync with the bus engine's rumble. Her small fists had twisted Michael's uniform pants into wrinkled knots, her grip so tight that her knuckles had turned white. "Please don't go, Daddy. Please don't go," she repeated like a mantra, as if the words themselves could somehow change reality. Jake had gone completely silent, but his body language screamed louder than any words. He'd pressed his entire face against his father's leg, his small frame shaking with the effort of holding back tears. At 6 years old, he'd already absorbed the military expectation that men don't cry, that soldiers are strong. But his death grip around his father's knee betrayed every emotion he was trying to suppress. Sophie, at 4, was operating on pure instinct. She'd somehow managed to climb higher, her little arms now wrapped around Michael's waist, her legs koala wrapped around his thigh. Her face was buried so deep in his uniform that her tears were creating a damp spot that spread slowly across the tan fabric. Every few seconds, she'd tighten her grip even more, as if she could somehow fuse herself to her father permanently. The morning sun had risen higher, casting longer shadows across their driveway. The same light that illuminated this heartbreaking scene was simultaneously shining on soldiers in Afghanistan, men and women who'd been through their own versions of this goodbye months or years ago. The thought offered no comfort, only the stark reminder of the global nature of military sacrifice. Michael's commanding officer had texted twice, "Bus on schedule, ETA, still on track." The military machine waited for no one, not even heartbroken fathers and clinging children. Duty had its own timeline. Indifferent to personal anguish, other military families from their street had begun their own morning routines, children walking 2 different bus stops, spouses heading to commissary runs, the normal rhythm of life on a military installation. But their normalcy felt like a spotlight on the Torres family's extraordinary pain. How do you explain that, while everyone else is starting another ordinary day? Your world is ending. The bus driver's patience was remarkable, but even Mrs. Henderson glanced at her watch. Other children were waiting at other stops. The schedule, like military duty itself, moved forward regardless of individual circumstances. She caught Michael's eye in her rearview mirror and gave him the slightest nod, a gentle reminder that time, however cruel, was still passing. Sarah finally moved from the porch. Each step toward her family felt like walking through quicksand, her body heavy with the knowledge that her intervention would make the separation real. She'd have to become the bad guy, the one who pulled children away from their father, the one who enforced the cruel reality that some things are bigger than family. "Kids." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the morning stillness it carried like a gunshot. 3 small heads turned toward her, faces streaked with tears and twisted with desperate hope. Maybe Mommy would save them. Maybe Mommy would tell Daddy he didn't have to go. But Sarah's expression told a different story. Her red-rimmed eyes and trembling lips delivered the message no words could soften. Daddy really was leaving, and it was time to let go. The grip loosened slightly, not from acceptance, but from the crushing realization that even Mummy couldn't stop this from happening. The children's sobs intensified, but their bodies began to understand what their hearts refused to accept. Michael felt the change immediately. The small hands that had been anchors of desperation became lighter, less certain. It was beginning the slow, devastating process of letting go that would define the next several minutes and haunt the next 15 months. The bus engine seemed to grow louder. Maureen's time had run out. The moment Sarah reached them, everything shifted into that surreal slow motion that happens when the heart breaks in real time. Michael Canaldone finally able to move as the children's grip loosened just enough to allow him to meet their eyes one final time. "Look at me, my brave soldiers," he whispered, his voice cracking on the word soldiers. Emma's tear-streaked face lifted first, her bottom lip trembling so violently she couldn't speak. Jake's eyes saw, much like Michael's own, were filled with a pain too deep for his 6 years to comprehend. Sophie's tiny hand reached up to touch her father's cheek, her fingers tracing the path of a tear he didn't realize he was shedding. "Daddy has to go do his job now," Michael continued, each word feeling like swallowing broken glass. "But I need you to remember something very important." He pulled them closer, creating a small circle of whispered promises and desperate love. "Every single morning when you wake up, I want you to look outside and find the sun, because no matter where I am in the world, we're looking at the same sun. And every night, when you see the moon and the stars, remember that Daddy is looking at them too, thinking about you." Emma's small voice broke through her sobs. "But what if it's cloudy?" The question was so innocent, so practical, so heartbreakingly childlike, that Michael had to close his eyes for a moment to steady himself. "Then you'll know I'm thinking about you even harder, trying to send my love through the clouds." Sarah knelt beside them now, her presence both a comfort and a signal that separation was inevitable. Her hands gently began to disentangle small fingers from uniform fabric. Each loosened grip another step toward goodbye. "Remember what we practiced?" she whispered to the children. "Daddy's going to help people, and we're going to be his home team, cheering him on from here." But no amount of preparation could make this moment feel anything less than devastating. Jake suddenly lunged forward, pressing his face against his father's chest one more time. "I don't want you to help other people," he sobbed. "I want you to help me with my homework. I want you to help me reach the monkey bars. I want you to help me not be scared of thunderstorms." Michael's composure finally shattered completely. His tears fell freely now as he held his son, feeling the weight of every missed moment that stretched ahead of them. "You are so brave, Jake. So much braver than me. And when I come home, we'll practice those monkey bars every single day." Sophie had gone completely limp in Sarah's arms, her small body surrendering to the inevitable. But her eyes never left her father's face, as if she was trying to memorize every detail. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice so small it was almost lost in the morning air. "Don't forget what I look like." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. His youngest daughter, who wouldn't turn 5 until he was deployed, who would grow and change in ways he'd only see through pixelated video calls and photographs. "Never," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "I could never forget what you look like. You're going to be in my dreams every single night." Emma had been unusually quiet during these final moments, and when she finally spoke, her words carried the wisdom of a child forced to grow up too fast. "Daddy, promise me you'll come home. Promise me you won't turn into one of those pictures that people put flowers in front of." The reference to military memorials, images she'd seen at ceremonies they'd attended, understanding more than any 6-year-old should, nearly broke every adult heart within earshot. Michael cupped her face in his hands, looking directly into her eyes with the intensity of someone making a sacred vow. "I promise you, Emma Rose Torres, that I will do everything in my power to come home to you." "Everything? Do you believe, Daddy?" She nodded, but her tears fell harder. Belief and fear can coexist in a child's heart with devastating clarity. The bus engine gave a gentle rumble, Mrs. Henderson's subtle signal that they couldn't wait much longer. Sarah began the impossible task of physically separating the children from their father. Emma came first, her small body rigid with resistance, but ultimately yielding to her mother's gentle guidance. Jake followed, his hands trailing along Michael's uniform until the very last second, fingertips reluctant to break contact. Sophie was the hardest. At 4, she didn't understand why everyone was conspiring to take her daddy away. Her cries became more desperate, more raw, as Sarah peeled her small arms from around Michael's neck. "No, no, no, Daddy, don't go, don't go." Michael stood slowly, his body feeling hollow and heavy simultaneously. He shouldered his duffel bag, the weight of his gear nothing compared to the weight of leaving. Each step toward the bus felt like walking underwater, the morning air thick with grief and love and the terrible necessity of duty. The children broke free from Sarah's grip one final time, running after him with the desperate speed of those who know they're racing against time itself. 3 small bodies collided with his legs again, this time with the frantic energy of last chances. "I love you, I love you, I love you," Emma sobbed against his uniform. "Come home safe, Daddy," Jake whispered, his voice breaking on the word safe. Sophie just held on, her small body shaking with sobs too big for her tiny frame. Michael bent down one final time, gathering all 3 children in his arms, in an embrace that tried to contain 15 months' wart of youth. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky," he whispered, the words a promise and a prayer. "And I will carry you with me every single day, until I come home." The bus door opened with a mechanical hiss that sounded like the world exhaling. Michael stood, kissed Sarah with the desperate passion of someone who didn't know when they'd kiss their wife again, and walked toward the vehicle that would begin his journey away from everything that mattered. As he climbed the steps, the children's cries reached a crescendo that seemed to echo off every house in the neighborhood. Through the bus window, Michael pressed his palm against the glass. 3 small hands pressed back from the outside, separated by a barrier that might as well have been the distance between continents. The bus pulled away slowly, respectfully, but with the inevitable momentum of military duty. Through the rear window, Michael watched his family grow smaller and smaller, Sarah holding all 3 children as they stood in their driveway, waving until the bus turned the corner and they disappeared from view. But their cries seemed to follow the bus long after they were out of sight, carried on the morning air like a lament for all the military families who faced this same impossible goodbye. As the yellow school bus disappeared around the corner, the Torres driveway fell into a silence that felt heavier than the loudest goodbye. Sarah stood there, holding 3 trembling children, all of them staring at the empty street as if Michael might somehow reappear. As if this had all been some terrible mistake that could be undone by wishing hard enough. The neighbors began to emerge with quiet offerings. Mrs. Chun approached with a casserole dish. The Johnsons brought over a plate of fresh cookies for the children. No words were exchanged. In military communities, this ritual of silent support happens instinctively. Everyone understands that some pain is too deep for words. That presence matters more than platitudes. Emma was the first to break the spell. "Is Daddy on the airplane yet?" she asked, her voice small and hoarse from crying. Sarah checked her phone. Michael's bus wouldn't even reach the base for another 20 minutes. The children's perception of time during trauma was heartbreakingly compressed. To them, Daddy was already gone, already impossibly far away. "Not yet, sweetheart. He's still on the bus, probably looking out the window and thinking about us." Sarah guided them back toward the house, each step a small act of rebuilding the routine that would carry them through the next 15 months. The living room still bore evidence of their last night together, pillows scattered from their family sleepover. Michael's coffee cup still sitting on the side table, the indent from his body still visible on the couch cushions. These mundane objects had suddenly become sacred artifacts, physical proof that he had been there, that this family had been whole just hours ago. Jake picked up one of his father's work boots from beside the door, holding it against his chest like a teddy bear. "It still smells like Daddy," he whispered, and Sarah felt her heart crack a little more. Sophie curled up in Michael's favorite chair, surrounded by the scent and memory of safety. Emma began collecting items: his reading glasses, a pen from his uniform pocket, a bookmark from his nightstand, creating a small shrine of father-shaped objects. Sarah's phone buzzed with the first text from Michael. "Made it to base. Kids okay? Love ya." All more than words, she showed the children. And for the first time since the bus left, she saw tiny sparks of hope in their eyes. Daddy was still thinking about them. Daddy was still Daddy, just farther away. This would become their new rhythm: text messages as lifelines, video calls as windows into a world that felt simultaneously close and impossibly distant. Sarah would learn to become both mother and father, to answer questions about deployment timelines with forced optimism, to hold all the tears that couldn't be shed in front of small, watchful eyes. The children would grow in his absence. Sophie would learn to ride a bike. Jake would lose his first tooth. Emma would star in her school play. These milestones would be celebrated through phone screens and care packages, love transmitted across continents through pixels and postal services. They would create new traditions: bedtime stories read over FaceTime, homework help provided via video chat, goodnight kisses blown through computer screens. But they would also discover resilience they never knew they possessed. Military children are forged in the fires of separation and reunion, learning early that love doesn't diminish with distance, that family bonds can stretch across oceans without breaking. They would count days on calendars, mark progress on deployment chains, and find strength in the knowledge that it was their sacrifice too served something larger than themselves. Months from now, Michael would call during a sandstorm in Afghanistan, his voice crackling through a poor connection, as he tried to comfort Sophie through a nightmare he couldn't physically soothe. He would miss Jake's soccer championship and Emma's dance recital, watching grainy phone recordings with tears streaming down his dusty face. He would carry their letters in his chest pocket through dangerous missions, their crayon drawings taped inside his helmet, their voices echoing in his memory during the longest nights. And Sarah would hold it all together, fielding middle-of-the-night video calls from halfway around the world, translating military updates into child-appropriate explanations, maintaining hope when her own faith wavered. She would become an expert at single parenting while keeping her husband present in their daily lives, ensuring that Daddy'd remained a living, breathing part of their family narrative rather than a distant memory. The hardest truth about military service is that it demands sacrifice, not just from those who wear the uniform, but from every person who loves them. Children who learn to say goodbye before they can properly spell their own names. Spouses who become experts at managing households and hearts across impossible distances. Parents who age years and months watching their loved ones serve in places they can't even pronounce. But there's also profound beauty in this sacrifice, in the way military families learn to cherish ordinary moments, because they understand how precious and fragile normal can be, in the strength that grows from surviving separation and the sweetness that comes from reunion. In children who understand service and sacrifice before they understand algebra, who wave at flags with genuine reverence because they know the cost of freedom in deeply personal terms. As Sarah tucked her 3 children into bed that night, the first of 450 nights they would face without Daddy's goodnight kisses, she whispered the same prayer that military families have whispered for generations. Bring him home safe. Make him strong. Help us be worthy of his sacrifice. Outside their window, the same stars that would shine on Michael's base in Afghanistan twinkled in the Kentucky sky, and somehow, impossibly, love traveled the distance between them, carried on prayers and video calls, sustained by memories and promises, and strong enough to bridge any gap that duty might create. If this story has touched your heart, If you've felt the weight of sacrifice that military families carry every day, please share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes don't just exist on battlefields. They exist in living rooms and driveways, in school buses and bedtime prayers, in the ordinary moments where love proves stronger than distance and family bonds stretch across continents without ever breaking.